Have you ever put off a software update on your phone for a few days?
Oh, definitely. Usually until the phone just forces me to do it.
Right. You know that exact feeling. The notification pops up. It tells you there are crucial bug fixes, maybe some fancy new security features, but you just hit remind me later.
Yeah, you just don't want to deal with the reboot.
Exactly. The temporary inconvenience, the slight change to your interface. Now, I want you to imagine putting off an update for over 3 centuries.
3 centuries, wow.
And when you finally, eventually, try to force that installation, it absolutely breaks your entire system. Welcome to this deep dive.
It is great to be here to get into this one.
We are taking a stack of fascinating historical and academic texts and extracting the core insights for you. Today, we are looking specifically at the Council of Constantinople in 1923.
Right.
It was an event that basically attempted a massive system update for the Eastern Orthodox Church.
And it's an incredible historical moment to examine. We are looking at a collision between the relentless push of modernity and the deep, unyielding roots of ancient tradition.
Absolutely.
To really set the stage for you, picture the atmosphere of our discussion today. We are navigating the dusty, echoing meeting halls of 1920s Constantinople. The air is thick with geopolitical tension, the aftermath of a world war, and the heavy weight of centuries of ecclesiastical authority.
You can almost feel the tension in the room.
Exactly. But as we zoom out, those meeting halls fade into a backdrop of ancient story calendars mechanisms tracking the movements of the heavens over millennia.
Because it's about so much more than time.
Precisely. What we are analyzing isn't just a matter of changing some dates on a piece of paper. It is fundamentally about authority, identity, and the immense, sometimes destructive friction that occurs when you try to force a synchronized rhythm onto a decentralized world.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the core issue that brought everyone to the table, which is the calendar itself.
The root of the whole problem.
Right. We have to rewind well before 1923 to understand the baseline. Back in the 16th century, the Roman Catholic Church and almost all of Western Europe completed a massive switch. They moved from the old Julian calendar over to the new Gregorian calendar.
Which was a huge scientific undertaking at the time.
Huge. And the Gregorian calendar is the standard that you and I use today to run our lives. But the massive historical caveat here is that the East did not make that switch.
They completely ignored the update.
Completely. Russia and the rest of the Orthodox world bypassed this update altogether. They remained on the old Julian calendar right up until the 1920s.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the friction this caused by the 1920s was becoming entirely unsustainable.
I can't even imagine.
Well, think about the infrastructure of the early 20th century. We are in the immediate aftermath of the First World War. You have international trade, complex diplomacy, integrated postal systems, railway schedules that cross continents.
Global telecommunications.
Exactly. All of these networks were becoming deeply intertwined. Yet you had a hard line drawn through the way time itself was recorded. For hundreds of years, the East and West were quite literally living on different dates.
It's a logistical nightmare just trying to picture it. You cross a border, and suddenly you travel weeks back in time, purely based on the calendar the local authority recognized.
It sounds like science fiction, but it was just daily commerce.
I keep coming back to the operating system analogy. Half the world is running on this shiny new software, and they've been running it smoothly, optimizing it, building entirely new economies on it since the 1500s.
Right.
Meanwhile, you have vast empires and entire societies stubbornly keeping their infrastructure running on legacy software.
And the push to modernize wasn't a philosophical whim for the leaders in Constantinople. It was a pressing, practical necessity.
You just couldn't function.
You cannot run a globalized economy or participate fully in post-war European diplomacy if your telegrams are dated 2 weeks in the past compared to the people receiving them in Paris or London.
The confusion that must have caused.
Oh, it was constant. The pressure to align with the West was immense, but it was countered by an equally immense pressure to maintain the distinct, independent identity of the Eastern Church. That tension is exactly what forced the leadership to finally act.
Which brings us to the main event. By May of 1923, the leaders of the Eastern Orthodox Church convened in Constantinople to figure this out.
To finally force the update.
Right. The meetings ran from May 10th to June 8th. Driven largely by the initiative of the ecumenical patriarch at the time, Meletius IV. also known as Meletius IV.
A very ambitious figure.
And right out of the gate, there is a major historical discrepancy regarding what this gathering was actually called and what kind of authority it really held.
Yes. The nomenclature of this event is highly contested, which is a massive red flag in ecclesiastical history.
How so?
Well, some contemporaries and certain historical records labeled this the Pan-Orthodox Council of Constantinople. Others referred to it more broadly as a pan-Orthodox gathering, and some factions even attempted to elevate its status by floating the term ecumenical council.
But the academic consensus pushes back hard on those grand titles, Rex.
Strongly. This raises an important question regarding the fundamental legitimacy of the council's authority.
Because it wasn't exactly a full house.
Not at all. The academic analysis we have, specifically the Orthodox Encyclopedia entry by Grigory Skobe from 2005, is definitive on this point. The term ecumenical is widely rejected by historians and theologians alike.
Because so many people were missing.
Exactly. The reasoning is structural. Representatives from the Alexandrian, Antiochian, and Jerusalem churches, along with a vast majority of the other local churches, simply did not participate in the work of the council.
The profound irony of calling a meeting pan-Orthodox when the most crucial players are missing is just staggering.
It really is.
It's like imagine throwing a massive family reunion where you plan to make rules for the entire extended family.
But 3/4 of the family actively boycotts the event.
Exactly. Alexandria is absent, Antioch is absent, Jerusalem is a no-show. Yet the faction sitting in the room in Constantinople decides they are going to forge ahead anyway.
Which is an incredibly bold move.
They are preparing to rewrite the very measurement of time for an entire decentralized network of believers without their input.
It exposes a critical structural flaw in how Meletius IV approached the crisis. We have to look calmly at the gravity of that institutional risk.
It seems like a recipe for disaster.
Because it is. When an authority figure attempts to mandate sweeping changes that affect the daily spiritual rhythms and practical lives of a massive decentralized population, doing so without broad representation is incredibly dangerous.
I can't just mandate a paradigm shift.
You cannot dictate a universal paradigm shift to a tradition-bound network of autocephalous churches without consensus. By pushing forward without those key patriarchates, the council was essentially building a new house on a fractured foundation.
And despite the missing RSVPs and that fractured foundation, they pushed forward anyway. The council actually reached a primary decision regarding the calendar reform.
They did.
The Greek Orthodox Church, along with several other branches that were present or compliant, finally agreed to adopt a new calendar. But, and this is a big but, they explicitly refused to just adopt the Western Gregorian calendar.
Which is fascinating.
Right. Even though the Gregorian calendar was the established international standard, the Eastern Orthodox leaders went a completely different route. They adopted something called the new Julian calendar.
The terminology they chose there is doing an incredible amount of heavy lifting.
Oh, absolutely.
Calling it the new Julian calendar is a masterclass in ecclesiastical diplomacy.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The mathematical quirk of this new Julian system is brilliant.
It's extremely clever.
This calendar corresponds perfectly with the Gregorian calendar. If you look at a Gregorian calendar and a new Julian calendar side by side today, the dates match exactly.
But not forever.
Right. It comes with a built-in divergence. They will only match until the year 2800. After the year 2800, the two calendars begin to drift apart again.
It's such a specific detail.
They sat down in 1923 and agreed to standardize their time with the West, but they engineered an expiration date almost 900 years in the future.
It sounds like a quirky workaround, but structurally, it was a profound ideological shield.
I mean,
We have to ask why they would go through the immense trouble of endorsing a new Julian calendar that meticulously mimics the Gregorian one, complete with a mathematical divergence in the 29th century.
instead of just saying, hey, we're using the Gregorian one now.
Exactly. It was a deeply calculated, face-saving technicality. They recognized the unavoidable need to modernize. They had to align their dates with the rest of the globe for trade, communication, and global integration.
The telegrams needed to match up.
Yes, but they could not totally capitulate to what was viewed as a distinctly Western or Roman Catholic invention. The ideological legacy of the 16th century divide was still way too potent.
So it's essentially a loophole.
A massive loophole.
They get the practical benefits of the Gregorian calendar without ever having to admit they adopted the Pope's calendar.
Exactly. It allowed them to sync up with the modern world schedule while maintaining the technical theological stance that they were still using an updated version of their own Eastern tradition.
That is so smart.
They didn't bow to the West, they just simultaneously arrived at the exact same dates with a slight astronomical correction that won't manifest for centuries. It's a fascinating example of using complex mathematics to solve an emotional and political problem.
So what does this all mean? They have their face-saving technicality, they have their highly specific new calendar that works perfectly until the year 2800, and they roll it out to the masses. Did it actually work? Did it bring the Orthodox world into modern synchronized harmony?
Not even close.
The historical record shows that it was an unmitigated disaster. Rather than uniting the Church under a modern framework, the 1923 Council of Constantinople became one of the most controversial events in modern Orthodox history.
It sparked outrage.
It led to massive, fracturing schisms across the entire faith.
The consequences were immediate and severe. You have to remember that religion, particularly within this tradition, is deeply intertwined with the daily routine.
It's not just a Sunday thing.
Right. Feast days, fasting periods, the complex calculations of Easter, these are the very rhythms of life for the faithful. Changing the calendar isn't just an administrative update. It fundamentally disrupts the lived experience of the religion.
And this disruption led directly to schisms within many of the autocephalous churches. Because these churches operate independently, appointing their own leaders without a higher external authority dictating their moves, introducing this new calendar caused immediate splintering.
People just walked away.
Entire factions completely rejected the new dates. These splinter factions became known as the Old Calendarist groups.
The traditionalists.
Exactly. They essentially looked at Constantinople and said, "We do not recognize the authority of this half-empty council. We reject the lack of representation from the absent churches, and we absolutely reject this new Julian loophole."
They saw right through it.
They firmly planted their feet and refused to shift their timeline.
What's fascinating here is how this event is analyzed in contemporary academia, moving beyond just the historical facts to the institutional psychology of the schism.
The postmortem, basically.
Exactly. One of the key references we are examining is a presentation by the University of Tartu School of Theology and Religious Studies.
Right, from 2021.
Featuring scholars Natalia Vasilovich, Irina Parrott, and Andrei Shishkov. Look at the title of their work, How the Pan-Orthodox Congress in Constantinople Has Broken Orthodoxy.
Broken.
That is an incredibly powerful, deliberate choice of words. It didn't merely challenge the institution or cause a temporary disagreement, it broke it.
Using the word broken really emphasizes the sheer scale of the failure. It wasn't a bump in the road. It was a fundamental shattering of the system.
It forces a critical look at the mechanics of change management. This is true whether you are looking at an ancient religious institution or a modern global organization.
The rules are the same.
Yes. When leadership forces a systemic update, even one that is completely logical and practically necessary, like standardizing the calendar to match global trade, if they completely ignore the emotional, cultural, and traditional ties of the people they are leading, the system breaks.
The logic wasn't the problem.
The pure logic of the calendar reform was completely sound. But the implementation lacked the necessary consensus, the institutional patience, and the respect for the deep-seated traditions of the Old Calendarists.
They tried to force the software update.
Exactly. The leadership prioritized the mechanical fix over the human element, and the resulting schism is a fracture that the institution is still dealing with today.
And as if the history of the event itself isn't wild enough, there's one final mind-boggling fact regarding these texts that really stopped me in my tracks.
The translation delay.
Yes. We've just spent all this time discussing how the 1923 Council was a reality-fracturing event. It broke orthodoxy, it caused lasting schisms, and it fundamentally changed the perception of time for millions of people. Yet, despite its immense historical gravity, the actual acts and decisions of this 1923 meeting were not translated into English until the year 2006.
The duration of that delay is remarkable.
83 years.
83 years of silence in the English-speaking academic world.
I really want you to let that sink in. For over 8 decades, if you were an English-speaking scholar, a historian, a theologian, or just a curious individual trying to read the primary source documents about why your calendar was suddenly shifted, you couldn't do it.
The texts were inaccessible.
The exact transcripts and decisions were essentially locked away behind a language barrier. It wasn't until a translator named Reverend Dr. Patrick Viscuso took on the monumental project in 2006 that these texts were made accessible.
A huge undertaking.
The book was published by the Inter-Orthodox Press, featuring a foreword by Demetrios Konstantelos, and it finally brought the specific, granular acts of the Council into the light for the English-speaking world.
This point really forces a reflection on historiography and the mechanics of modern learning.
It makes you wonder what else we're missing.
Exactly. For over 80 years, a massive portion of the global academic community was essentially locked out of the primary documents of the very council that fractured the Eastern Orthodox calendar. We have this modern assumption that important historical information, especially from the 20th century, is universally accessible, heavily documented, and broadly translated.
But it's not always true.
No! This is a glaring example of how information access, or the distinct lack thereof, shapes our fundamental understanding of history.
It creates a massive blind spot. If you can't read the primary documents, you are entirely reliant on hearsay, summaries, or the biased interpretations of whatever secondary sources happen to be available in your language.
Exactly. Without Viscuso's translation work in 2006, English speakers were likely relying on deeply filtered accounts of what actually happened in those meeting halls in Constantinople.
You're just getting someone else's spin on it.
It underscores a vital reality for anyone doing a deep dive into history. Your understanding of the past is entirely dependent on the documents you can actually read. It highlights the immense, often underappreciated power of translators and archivists.
The unsung heroes.
Truly, they're the ones who actually build the bridges between the primary events and our modern understanding of them.
It definitely gives you a newfound appreciation for the people doing the tedious work of digging through archives and translating obscure texts so the rest of us can actually get the full story.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up this deep dive, let's take a look at the incredible journey we've navigated through these sources. We started with a staggering 400-year calendar delay between the East and the West, creating a logistical nightmare for a rapidly globalizing world.
A world that desperately needed to sync up.
Right. And that tension finally culminated in Constantinople in 1923, resulting in a half-empty council convened by Patriarch Meletius IV, where the most crucial players boycotted the room.
A recipe for structural failure.
Then we analyzed the creation of the new Julian Calendar, a quirky mathematical band-aid designed to save face while syncing up with the Gregorian standard, perfectly calibrated to expire in the year 2800.
A brilliant bit of compromise.
And finally, we saw how forcing that purely logical update without universal consensus resulted in the Old Calendarists schisms, proving just how incredibly difficult it is to overwrite human traditions.
It is a profound narrative about the collision between practical modernization and deep-rooted identity. The logistics required change, but the culture resisted the method of that change.
So the next time you glance at the calendar on your wall or check the date on your phone's lock screen, I want you to remember the immense institutional friction, the boycotts, and the deep theological schisms that were required historically just to get people to agree on what day it is.
It wasn't easy.
It is so easy to take synchronized global time for granted, but it was incredibly hard fought.
It truly was. And I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to explore on your own.
Go for it.
We saw today how a relatively minor mathematical shift, just aligning dates on a page to facilitate trade and communication, caused a lasting, painful schism in 1923.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder. As we move rapidly into an era where global authorities and tech infrastructure are proposing entirely new universal standards, things like global digital identities or new frameworks for digital timekeeping, how much of our resistance to these modernizations will be driven by pure logic?
That's a great point.
And how much of that resistance will be driven by our deep-seated, entirely human need to protect our traditional identities from being overwritten by a new global standard?
A fantastic question to ponder as we navigate our own era of rapid updates. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the archives, and keep questioning the history behind the everyday systems that run your world.